My guest today is Mr. Brian Colao, one of the most trusted voices in dentistry and the force behind the biggest DSO conference there is. So if you're a dentist and you've thought about maybe selling your practice, growing it, or just what we all want to do, reduce stress while keeping more of what we earn, then today's episode is for you. So Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Jeff, it's my pleasure to be here. So good to be with you today.
So let's just kick it off with, kind of the question, what's changed? So just in plain English, in the last, let's say 5 to 7 years, what would you say has changed the most for dentists that you've seen as a whole?
Well, it's funny. You say 5 to 7 years. There's been multiple changes in 5 to 7 years. So like if we rewind, there's been more changes, Jeff, in 5 to 7 years in the last 100 years. So if we go back, like say 7 years, I would tell you there's a great evolution and consolidation in dentistry going on where solo practices, group practices are converting and being acquired by DSOs at a higher rate than in the history of dentistry. And I would have told you, sort of 7 years ago that 10 years from now, which would be 3 years from today, the industry would be 70, 80% DSOs. Unfortunately, what we all didn't know was going to happen is COVID, that in 2020, it was going to, sort of shut everything down and we were going to have to deal with all of that. And that's created sort of unique challenges. Now the interest rates are the highest they've ever been. See, if we went back 7 years, dentistry was virtually recession proof, even proved to be pandemic proof. I still believe it's the most incredible profession, but there was nothing stopping it. It was all tailwinds, no headwinds. As a result of COVID and everything that sort of happened there, the interest rates have skyrocketed, doubled and tripled in some cases. The cost of labor has gone up. There's a shortage of labor. While all of this has happened, of course, costs of supplies and goods have gone up due to tariffs. They may go up further, but reimbursement rates remain flat or only went up a tiny amount. So dentistry lives sort of in this unnatural state where all the expenses have gone up, but the reimbursement rates have stayed largely flat. I mean, any other business, you call Jeff a plumber to come to your house. He can say, all right, Jeff, your pipes are leaking. I'm happy to come, but it's going to be like a $25 surcharge. Fuel went up. Sorry, I got to charge you $25. Unfortunately, dentistry has been unable to do that. And it's struggled for the first time really in the history of the profession, last, 100, 150 years. We're in a bit of a struggle. I still think it's great industry. We're going to come out of it, but we're in a bit of a struggle here with all the prices, costs, inflation being at the highest point, and the reimbursement rates remaining largely flat. So I would say there's been sort of, if you want to talk about 5 to 7 years, there's been 2 inflection points. The first one is the industry is consolidating and it's all turning to DSOs. And, that would be the first inflection point. The second inflection point are these extremely challenging economic conditions that hit around June of 2022, slowed down a lot of the consolidation and made things, quite frankly, a lot more difficult for the industry. And the final inflection point has hit about 3 or 4 years ago. This is where I'm saying, you picked a great 5 to 7 years to ask me about. If you asked me about this 20 years ago, I'd say, oh, well, nothing's really changed. Hey, next question, Jeff. But no, here, the third inflection point is technology. There's been more advancements in technology in the last 5 years than there's been in the previous 100. You've got things like diagnostic AI. You've got AI to listen to phone calls and help with patient retention. You've got AI to assist with billing and collecting and chatting with the patients. And there's all sorts of automation, and the practice management systems have become incredibly advanced. They're in the cloud now. They're not just on-prem, on the premises. So there's been some incredible technological advancements that can help you overcome some of these challenging economic conditions, do more with less, and make your life a lot easier. So it's been an incredibly eventful 5 to 7 years.
You'd mentioned a little bit when you were talking about interest rates. So in your opinion and what you're seeing, are you seeing that basically the higher interest rates have affected practice sales or not?
Yeah. Oh, they have. Yeah. What they've done is, how should I say it? It's been incredibly material. It's absolutely impacted it. So some buyers If you're talking about traditional dentist to dentist buyers and the interest rates are higher, if you finance it, it's higher to get your loan approved. Your buying power is a lot less with the higher interest rates. That's the traditional old fashioned dentist to dentist. If you're talking about what we've been dealing with lately, DSOs acquiring practices, several of them, as a result of the high interest rates affecting their credit facilities and their ability to borrow, were unable to do any transactions. Others had to significantly reduce the amount of transactions. Maybe you thought you were going to buy 20 practices, now you can buy 5. Some you thought you were going to buy 20, you can't buy any. In addition, it's lowered the multiples of EBITDA, basically the prices that are paid for the practices, because you have to service the debt. The interest rates are higher. You have less buying power, so you can't pay as much. So it's dramatically affected the dental M&A markets.
So I talk a lot about on my channel about financial freedom through different streams of income besides just dentistry. And because, as you know, I'm sure you know from dealing with dentists all the time, it's very stressful. It's very physically demanding on us. So, so we're actually, I'm talking to people now that are actually earlier, like in their maybe late 30s to mid 40s, that are thinking about selling their practice, maybe like to a DSO or something like that, just because they just want a lot of the headaches gone. So if let's say you're in your maybe 40s, you're a dentist, you're like in your 40s or 50s, you're thinking about selling, what are some signs that you think are telling me, well, maybe wait a little bit, or go ahead and pull the trigger now?
Well, your EBITDA, okay? And if people don't know, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, it's the standard that's used to value practices.
Mm-hmm.
And, you got to evaluate your EBITDA. Like some people listening probably say, oh, I don't even know what EBITDA is, or I don't know what my EBITDA is. We better figure out. That's step one. Figure it out. And we can get help. We can get you an accountant. Even if you have no clue, we can calculate your EBITDA. So one, you got to figure this out. You have to, because you want to be empowered. You're talking about financial freedom. How are you going to have financial freedom when you don't even know what your practice is worth and what your options are? And the only way to figure out what everything you built is worth is to calculate your EBITDA. Once you know your EBITDA, the next step is to evaluate it. Is there anything we can do to increase our EBITDA? Maybe work on our payer mix, maybe cut our overhead a little bit. Maybe we take a private jet every month to Vegas as a perk for the staff, and maybe we need to cut that out, and all of a sudden our EBITDA goes up, or do it like once a year instead of like every month or something like that. There's a lot I'm making a joke about that, but there's a lot of things you can do to increase your EBITDA, lower your expenses, cut your overhead. Because before you go to a sale, the reason I'm answering this is you want to make sure your EBITDA is at the highest point possible for your organization. I mean, you can't say, hey, we're going to shut the electricity and water off and just, big jugs of water and flashlights. No, you can't do that. Obviously, if you did that, you'd increase the EBITDA, but you can't do that. But you have to make it the highest amount physically possible while still being able to successfully operate your practice. And you got to eliminate, surplus, overages, duplicate expenses and things. And so that would be the first exercise. What is my EBITDA and what can I do to increase my EBITDA? Both right now, things like today I can do, and then things like it might take a couple years. And then you got to make a decision, right? If you're 38 years old and you're saying, hey, I'll use silly numbers. My EBITDA is $100 right now, but in 2 years I can make it 150. Well, you'll only be 40 by then. That's probably a good idea. You probably want to do that. If you're 61 right now and you're like, look, my EBITDA is 100 now. By cutting a few expenses, I can make it like 103. I probably could make it 120 in the next 3 years, but I'm 62 and I want to go to the golf course. I want to see my grandkids. I just don't want to do it. You may look at that and say, you know what, 103 it is. Let's go to market, right now. So step one, figure out what your EBITDA is. Step two, figure out what you can do to increase your EBITDA in the immediate short term. There's always expenses, things you can cut in the immediate short term. Also in the long term, what you can possibly do. And then you got to evaluate it based on your age, your tolerance, and what you want to do with your life. Now, if you're 60 years old and you love it, you're saying, this defines my existence. If I didn't do this, there'd be nothing for me. Well, then heck, maybe you want to wait 3 years, increase your EBITDA and do it. But if you're 60, and as you pointed out, Jeff, my back hurts, my wrist hurts. I can barely, treat patients anymore. This is getting to the end for me. Well, then look, you want to do what you can in the short term and go to market.
So let's shift gears a little bit to the young dentist.
Yep.
All right. So maybe you're right out of dental school, or maybe you've worked a little bit for somebody, and then you're kind of thinking, all right, I need to do something. So who should consider maybe opening a practice from scratch, like I did many years ago, or just buying an office, and why?
Well, the market's very, very different, right? Who that should consider it is who understands what they're getting into and
Mhm.
still finds it appealing. Okay, today, Jeff, you were still at a time when maybe, the loans weren't as much as they are today. The cost of, inflation and opening things up aren't what they are today. But today, right now, you try to open something up, you're probably average debt's 500 to 600,000 coming out of dental school, number one. Number two, the interest rates are, higher on the loan. You may have, monthly debt service between your loans and between what it costs to open up the practice, either to buy one or open up a de novo practice. It'd be like you have a house in an exclusive neighborhood, but you don't got the house yet. You're just paying that for, debt service on your practice. But, if you're entrepreneurial, that doesn't bother you. You don't mind being in charge of your own fate. You're an employee somewhere. Hey, it's somebody else's problem. Just make payroll, right? This, Jeff. If you're in charge, and suddenly, the big organization across the street that was sending you all the business because they had a big plan across the street closes for some reason, well, that's your problem now. You got to figure out a way to get more patients, or, business is slow 1 month, or, one of the suppliers raises your prices. Well, that's your problem right now. How are you going to negotiate with the landlord? That's your problem. How are you going to negotiate with the insurance companies and the pay? That's your problem. If you're comfortable with that and you say, hey, no, I enjoy the challenge. I'd rather be my own boss. I'm happy to negotiate with the landlord. I'm happy to negotiate with the payers. I'm happy to do my own marketing. If there's a downturn, I'll hustle and get more business. That's what I like to do. Then, there's still incredible opportunities to open up your own practice. Only 50% of the people, Jeff, go to the dentist. So there's a lot of runway out there for new patients and to open up, a practice. But you got to know what you're getting into. DSOs are all over the market. They pay, probably 40 cents on the dollar what you pay. You call up Henry Schein or you call up Patterson, you pay what you pay. They probably pay considerably less. So it's harder sometimes, to compete with them. But if you're comfortable, being an entrepreneur and being in charge of your own fate and like hustling and, taking care of stuff, dentistry is incredible opportunities. But if what I said is not appealing to you, having big loans and having to be in charge of your own fate, hustle all the time, and, you can't take vacations every time you want because you got to watch your practice, then some options are you can work for somebody else or you can work, within a DSO organization. I mean, DSO organizations provide incredible opportunities, and a high percentage of dentists right now are choosing to work for DSOs because they don't want all of the hassle of their own practice. And if they do end up someday wanting to be an owner of their practice, they can partner with the DSO organization to do that. So they have ownership, but they're not completely on their own with no guidance. That's becoming much more appealing.
I think one of your stats was incorrect because you said 50% of the population don't go to the dentist. In Louisiana, it's more like 20%.
That does not go.
It does not.
Well,
the,
nationally,
the majority don't go. Like
You mean
80% don't go.
80% don't go? I see. No,
Yeah.
80%. Right.
Yeah.
Nationally, right. I'm just talking about nationally. The
Yeah.
number is somewhere between 50 to 60% of the people that don't go to the dentist. Yes, there are individual states, and I don't want to
Mhm.
pick on Louisiana. I love going down there. I'm speaking in New Orleans at a conference soon. I went to the Super Bowl in New Orleans. I don't want to pick on Louisiana, but yes, there are some states that are much worse, and there are some states that are a little bit better.
Got it. So let's use your attorney skills a little bit. Let's talk about compliance, because we know this is where a lot of dentists trip up, and as you know, deals fall apart not because of the dentistry, but because of paperwork and compliance. So, in your opinion, from your experience, what are some of the most common legal mistakes that either kill the deal or cause maybe fines along the process?
Yeah, I mean things that'll kill the deal are labor and employment issues. Okay, you've got people that are independent contractors and they need to be W-2 employees. A buyer will
Mhm.
look at that and say, "No thanks, don't want that problem." Two, you've misclassified people. You've put people as exempt when they should be hourly. That somebody might look at that and say, "Look, that's liability. Don't want to do that." Sometimes there will be also situations where you're not giving people proper breaks and rest periods and punching in and punching out and calculating their hours correctly. So labor and employment is a big one where somebody could look at that if you've
Mhm.
done everything wrong and said, yeah, we're not going to do the deal. Another one is HIPAA violations, OSHA violations. Your communications are not HIPAA compliant. That can be a big source of, if somebody buys it, now they're going to take on that liability. Another one, cyber protection. You've had a cyber attack, or you're not buttoned up and you're vulnerable to a cyber
Mhm.
attack. Somebody might look at that and say, we don't want to take on that kind of liability. I mean, those are things that I commonly see that might interfere with the deal. I mean, there's probably 30 or 40 things I could talk about in general that can trip up a practice, but a lot of them you pay a tiny fine, you move on, it's not a big deal. But the ones I just mentioned are things that could be deal breakers, that could really interfere with your ability to do a transaction.
So before talking to like a buyer, like a DSO or something like that, what are some of the documents that dentists probably should start to get to the point where they get them in order before they even go there?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking, Jeff, about like a solo practitioner, or who are
Yeah.
we talking? Yeah, like a solo practitioner needs to have their insurance coverages lined up. Make sure they've got proper insurances, got their employment records lined up to make sure everybody's a W-2 that needs to be a W-2. Everybody's hourly that needs to be hourly. If somebody's exempt, that's okay. They need to be exempt. Make sure you can prove that hourly employees are properly punching in, getting breaks, getting rest periods. Just doing like a labor and employment sort of audit would be real helpful. Make sure that your PMS system is in order, that it's HIPAA compliant. And I mean, if you're using one of the major ones, it should be, but make sure
Mhm.
that it is. There's no issues with your PMS system. Make sure you've got a plan for cybersecurity, that your organization is secure and you're not vulnerable. There's consultants, people you can use to do that. But these are things that I would want to make sure. And then this is financial. I know you were asking me about compliance. Make sure you know what your EBITDA is and your finances are in order, because I would be remiss. It's business, not legal. But what's another thing that kills a lot of deals? You thought your EBITDA was 100, and the buyer looked at it and says, "No, your EBITDA is like 25. Your financials are a mess, and when we really looked at this, it's not as valuable as you think it is." Don't be surprised like that. Make sure you've got your finances in order, and you believe that what you're going to tell the buyer your practice is worth, it's really worth. You can say, look, we had an independent accounting firm come in here. They did an audit. Here's what it is. This is what it is. We're not making it up. Because honestly, that kills more deals than anything else. The compliance stuff does kill some deals. But if you asked me, like, what kills 75% of all deals? Misalignment of the finances. You thought it was worth $100. Somebody came in and said it was 20. Now, if you had it audited, or you had an outside, firm come in and look at it, you could have eliminated all that. You would have known exactly what was happening. But instead, you had your solo practitioner accountant that always kind of helped you over the years, or a bookkeeper or something, and they're not necessarily schooled with EBITDA or GAAP
Mhm.
or any of the things that got to happen, and they were operating on one assumption and the buyer's operating on an entirely different assumption. Really, if I'm looking at what kills deals, you want to make sure you're not misstating your financials and they're accurate.
So now I want to get into something that I really love learning about, and I think it's the big topic now is technology,
Yep.
specifically AI. And you mentioned it a little bit, and there's all kinds of tools and things that are coming out. But as you know, not all the tech out there is created equal. So,
That's right.
in your opinion, that you've seen, I know you work with dentists, plus you've got at your conference, you have these fantastic vendors that are coming out and showing their software and different things. So which tools out there that you're seeing are actually putting money in the dentist's pocket pretty much right away when they start implementing it, instead of waiting like a year or two to see anything?
Okay, so several come to mind. First, diagnostic AI. It lets you ethically
Like,
do more cases. Okay. The diagnostic AI will overlay on top of your x-rays. It catches more caries, cavities, things that the naked eye can't catch, and will let
mhm.
you do more cases. You get nervous when you say you're going to do more yeah, ethically, because you just can't with the naked eye see stuff that the AI catches, and you can monetize those opportunities in a completely ethical way. If anybody audits it, you show the AI caught this. It also helps you convince the patient that they need treatment. The patient's lack of confidence in a dentist is a big reason for lack of acceptance of treatment planning. But if the AI catches it and you're just like, hey guys, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's turn it on and see. Oh, look at this. It caught a cavity. That's confidence inspiring for the patient. The patient's like, yeah, my dentist isn't just making this up. I see it right there. It's there. So diagnostic AI is the number one thing that on day one, on week one, you're going to catch more cases than you did with the naked eye. So that's something that's big. To me, some of the PMS systems out there, I'm a big fan of Denticon, for example, by Planet DDS. It can auto adjudicate insurance claims and help you get approvals, without you having to devote human resources to doing it, human capital to doing it. And that brings in, revenue. It also gives you access in real time to key performance indicators, KPIs, as we call them, and help you course correct. I mean, that's something like on week one can add value. Something else, there's AI, there's a company called Patient Prism that listens to your phone calls for you and will tell you why patients are accepting treatment, why they're not making appointments. Is your staff doing a good job of doing the things they should do? Say, are you in pain? Do you want an appointment? Things you want your staff doing. That brings value, almost immediately, when you sign that up. There's companies out there, Voice AI is one, that can dial tons and tons of phone calls, simultaneously and do insurance verifications and make sure, you've got your insurance verified and the payers verified and you're ready to go. And they can place dozens of calls, per minute and do things your staff can't do. And those are things that bring revenue, virtually immediately, to the office. And there's a lot of things that long term can improve your revenue. But you were asking me about things that on day one can really help.
How about any AI out there that you know of? So when, sometimes when well, not sometimes, almost all the time now, when you call these top companies, it used to be a phone tree, press one for this,
Yep.
press two
Yep.
for this. But now, unless you're really paying attention, you're thinking you're actually talking to somebody, but it's actually AI and they're asking you really good questions to get you to, you know, to the right department. But are you seeing anything or have you come across anything that, because when people, a lot of times when people call, they're like, they want to know about, do you set my insurance? How much is this? How much is the exam? Blah, blah, blah. So maybe, is there any AI out there that you know of that is maybe helping those patients with those questions and getting them to the point where they're pretty warm now to go ahead and schedule the appointment?
Yeah, I mean there are AI scheduling platforms that all of the big dental supply companies have available and will sell to you that'll do smart scheduling. I mean, you can schedule appointments in the middle of the night. They'll screen the patients for
Mhm.
insurance and what they have, and they'll ask you policy numbers and things, and then you'll be all loaded up by the time they'll schedule the appointment, and by the time you get to the office, everybody will have all the information, and you can get right down to treatment without having to capture all of that information. I mean, there's a lot of really good solutions out there.
Any top ones come to mind that you can think of?
I don't remember the brand names of them, but anybody that has a relationship with, say, Henry Schein or Patterson
Mhm.
and asks about this,
Talk to
you
their
can
rep.
get access to it really quickly. Now you're asking me a good question. I'm going to go back now after we're done and look up some of this stuff. But no, but it's all available. So anybody, and I would imagine anybody listening to this that's a dentist knows who to call at Henry Schein or Patterson or something like that. Get with your rep and they'll be able to help you.
So let's wrap it up by the number one reason I reached out to you, and it was because of your conference that you put on each year. And I heard from multiple people you've got to get this guy on your podcast because he has the largest DSO conference I know in the country, maybe probably the world. So, and I've been practicing dentistry for over 20 years. I'd never heard of it. So for people that have never heard of it, your conference, what is it? What do you do? Who's it for? Just give us the spiel.
Yeah, people that don't know me, I'm the director of Dykema. We're a law firm, our dental service organization group, and we represent something like 700 plus dental organizations in all 50 states, 6 Canadian provinces, Europe, Japan, Australia. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been a lawyer in the dental industry. Now, about 13 years ago, because we're coming up on our 13th year, we created the Dykema DSO conference. And it's a conference for anybody that's interested in the evolution of dentistry and DSOs. We had last year a record attendance. We had 2,500 people there. I believe it is the largest DSO conference in the world. Certainly the United States. I'm not aware of anything because, DSOs started in America. They're starting to branch out throughout the world, but there's no conference this size. So people that attend that would be group practices, solo practices that are interested maybe in selling to a DSO or learning what it would be like. A lot of dental students go that maybe want to work for a DSO, want to learn about that. Any DSO comes, whether they got 5 offices, 50 offices, 100, 2,000 offices, all the large middle market, the large DSOs, the middle market, the small, the emerging DSOs, they're all there. All the dental technology companies are there that want to sell or do business, with the DSOs. All the consultants, all the, accounting folks, the bankers that want to lend to, DSOs and practices are there. And what we always say about it, Jeff, is 3 things: best content, best networking, and most fun. And we try to put those 3 things together. And, we do. Obviously the content I personally handle, and I've been here 30 years. It's really value-added content. It's not sales pitches. Nobody can buy their way onto the stage. They have to know what they're talking about, have a proven track record of adding value. Networking, if everybody's there, you're going to get the best networking. And we got 2,500 people. So I promise you, historically, everybody's there. And then the final thing is the most fun. We do things like a drone show. We had a drone show. We had John McEnroe here this year. We've had Andre Agassi, the tennis player, there. We had Belinda Carlisle from the Go-Go's singing one time. We put together really nice. We had Coach K from Duke was there last year, not this year, but last year, Coach K was our keynote speaker. So we always get some fun keynote speakers, some inspirational speakers. We have a drone show. We had a nightclub there that had like 700 people in it till 2 a.m. We always try to make it as fun as we can for everybody. And this year, it's going to be July 15th through the 17th, the same place it always is, at the Gaylord Rocky Mountain Resort by the Denver airport. So Denver area, fly into Denver and go to the Gaylord. And we'll even get you a discount code, for your listeners if they want to do it. I imagine we'll get that released for you. But anybody that wants to see it, it's Dykema.com, DykemadSO.com, DYKEMA. DSO.com, DykemadSO.com, and you can register for this year's conference and get your discount code.
And I'll put the link to everything that Brian just talked about in the video description below. So that's great. So before we end, two lightning round questions for you. All right. Number 1, what's the biggest myth that you hear about DSOs?
Yeah, the biggest myth is low quality of care. People say, oh, if I do a DSO, it's going to be low quality of care. Actually, the DSOs have a higher quality of care on average than solo practitioners because people are watching the store. If you're a solo practitioner, I'm sure, you're doing the best you can, but nobody's evaluating you, grading you, looking at what you're doing, comparing what you're doing against industry metrics. Nobody's doing that. You're just doing your own thing. In the DSOs, they have clinical departments that look at everything that the dentists do that work there and say, you should have about, I'm just making this up, 10 crowns a month. You got like 25. Hey, what's going on here? Why is that happening? Or, you should be able to do this amount of cases, but you're doing this amount. Do we need to train you? Do we need to give some experience? If there's a dental board complaint or something, somebody's going to coach you. If you've got your own practice, you're just going to try to make the dental board complaint go away. I don't know that you're going to coach your yourself too much about it, right? So DSOs actually, on average, doesn't mean you can't find one DSO somewhere that's doing a bad job, but on average, DSOs have a higher quality and a higher standard of care than solo practitioners. So the biggest myth is that DSOs have low quality care. It's just not true.
And last question, a book or podcast that you'd recommend to every dentist?
Well, the book that has governed sort of my life has been The Go Giver. It's when you give without expectation of anything in return. The book is called The Go Giver. It's a short book. You can read it in a couple hours, and it's sort of governed. I mean, just for business, it's not going to teach you how to be a good dentist or a bad dentist. It's going to teach you how to govern your life and network and interact with people, because I think it's really, really important. A lot of dentists in particular, a lot of lawyers do this too. You get caught in your own bubble, your own world, and you don't know what's going on out there. That's why your podcast here is great. It helps people get exposure to other voices and other ideas out there. But if you're a dentist listening to this, whether you go to my conference or another conference, or you just listen to a bunch of podcasts, you got to get exposed to other ideas out there. And I feel like you got to network in your community. It'll help you bring in patients. It'll help you get well known. And the Go Giver really tells you a great roadmap for how to network and how to help people without expectation of anything immediately in return. And for me, I've done that for 30 years, and I've got more in return than I ever dreamed I would get by giving to people without expectation of anything in return.
Excellent. Well, the website is dykemadso.com. Again, I'll put it in the link below, description below. Brian, I really appreciate you joining us, and I definitely look forward to attending your conference in July.
Well, we look forward to having you. You're going to come as my personal guest, and thanks for having me on this show. I really appreciate it.